how can people recognize, adults recognize if what they are carrying or suffering from is unresolved trauma
Yeah,
or
I think
unhealed trauma?
that's a great question. I think part of that is to just reflect on your upbringing, your childhood, your life experiences so far, and just be honest with yourself. And have you dealt with things like, so a good way to check is, when you think back on something, does fear wash over you? Does guilt wash over you? Do you avoid thinking of certain things that have happened in your life because it's too painful or it's too uncomfortable for you to even go there in your own mind? I feel like that would be a good indicator that you have some unprocessed things to deal with. But also, a lot of these things, it's like once we get into it, we find that they're linked. But I would just say, if you struggle with any kind of anxious tendencies that are, I feel like anxiety has a bad rap, but anxiety is like normal emotion. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
anxious all the time, or if you're depressed, or if you have your temper is blowing out of, if you have like,
Mm-hmm.
if your emotions aren't like always coming back into balance and they're kind of just like raging out of control and like diving deep, then I would say like there's some unprocessed things to deal with there.
Welcome, hello, and welcome to the Freedom Seeker Show, the place for unfiltered conversations that matter to women. I'm your host, Yvonne Winkler. I'm a certified life coach, facilitator, women's wisdom guide, and mental health advocate. And I want to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. And here with me today is the beautiful, the wonderful Katie Potratz. And she is also a certified clinical hypnotherapist and pain processing therapist and author, which we are going to talk a little bit about today. Through deep subconscious reprogramming, she guides her clients on a journey of healing, ranging from anxiety and trauma to self-worth and even chronic pain. In her book, The Uncaged Mind, she shares the magnitude of the subconscious mind and how our unconditioned beliefs keep us stuck in the patterns of shame, fear, and pain. Katie is passionate about empowering individuals to harness their own ability to heal themselves and create a wildly fulfilling life. And that's why she's here on the Freedom Seeker Show, because that's what we do here. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Yvonne.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, not just as we chatted already in the green room about our author's journey, but what really intrigued me about this topic was the connection between trauma and pain and how we can carry it through and how it affects our belief system and all of like our lives on a day-to-day basis, not just in a virtual world in the future sometime, or if I don't do something about it, this will happen someday down the road. No, this is impacting me right now, right here. So I would love to know a little bit more about that. Can you elaborate, for example, on how childhood subconscious programming influences the challenges that we face now as adults?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a topic that I am also very passionate about because I feel like in this day and age, we have really separated the mind from the body. And so if something's happening in the body, the answer must be in the body. And if something's happening in the mind, the answer must be in the mind. And I feel like the deeper we go in that direction, the more we're seeing the pieces as the pieces instead of seeing the whole person. And so when you see someone as a whole person and you know that if they're ill today or if they're in pain today, they have a lifetime's worth of a story behind that, and it didn't just appear one day out of the blue. So there's actually been studies that, and I won't quote the studies because I can't remember every detail, but there has been studies that prove that childhood experiences, distressing childhood experiences, things like abuse, neglect, or even things like parental depression or parental addictions and things like that can actually lead to a higher risk of developing autoimmune diseases later in life. They've actually found like a very clear link to that. So basically What that tells us is when we go through experiences that are highly distressing as a child, when our body, our brain, our nervous system is developing, it has lasting effects. And so I'm not a doctor. I am a hypnotherapist, so I work with kind of the after effects. But this is how I understand it: is as a child or as an adult or as any part of your life, when you go through something that's really distressing, we call it trauma. And I quote trauma because I feel like a lot of people think trauma is just those big ones: neglect, abuse, violence, those kinds of things. But it's actually, there's a lot of other trauma that people don't consider trauma, and they can be very simple things, but especially as a child, we're highly sensitive. I mean, especially, our parents are our sole caregivers. We are, we desire their unconditional love. And so if something like that isn't given to us as a child, like that can also be traumatic. And so when we go through traumatic experiences that are highly distressing, it causes our entire body. So seeing the person as a whole, it causes psychological damage, and it causes our body to go into a state of distress. And when our body is in a state of distress, a bunch of things happen. But the overarching theme is that we're worried about survival only. And so we're not worried about regeneration. We're not worried about growing. We're not worried about digesting or anything like that. We're worried about survival, and that's it. And when our body is in that stress response, which it's supposed to go into, so it's totally normal, it's okay. But when it goes into that state and our brains are not able to fully process the emotion that we're feeling. So for example, if we're feeling fear, if we're feeling shame, if we're feeling, guilt or anything else, and we're not able to process that either because we're too young or because we don't feel safe to, or we don't know how to, then we simply store it. And so we just kind of like compartmentalize that, shove that to the back. That's too painful to think about. That's too painful to feel. And so we kind of put that in the back. And then our body just continues to be in that distressed state because we haven't actually dealt with the emotions. Our emotions are supposed to be, move through us. We're supposed to feel them, and then they kind of move on. When we don't feel them and process them, they stay within us. Yeah. And so they're not necessarily in our bodies, but they're in our mind, and our mind is, the control for the body. And so, when you are afraid, you tend to like tense up, your blood pressure might raise, all these things happen in your body. And when you have that unprocessed emotion just lingering in your body all the time, then it creates like an underlying theme of stress in your body all the time. And so that can then later in life lead to chronic disease, chronic pain, chronic illness. That can lead to anxiety, that can lead to depression, that can lead, it basically can lead to any and all of the above. But actually in chronic pain patients that I work with, a lot of them have themes of, anxiety, or themes of they're hypercritical of themselves, they're hypervigilant, they have all of these themes that would indicate that they don't feel safe. And so it's all just the stored emotion that we haven't processed. And it could be from childhood, it could be from adolescence, it could be from earlier as an adult, but it's the emotions that we haven't processed that are just lingering there. It's like there's this saying that says, time heals all wounds. And it's like, no. Time buries everything. It doesn't actually go away. It just gets buried. And soon it's buried so deep that you can't even remember that it's there, but you're still feeling the effects of it. So that's kind of the link between our emotional body and our mental body. And the two are completely intertwined. Like there is no one and the other. They're completely interwoven. And so when something's happening in one, it's happening simultaneously in the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which beautifully already led into the second question I had around that, which is how does unresolved trauma directly impact chronic pain and the symptoms? But maybe before you answer that, just a follow-up question to what you said about how can people adults recognize if what they are carrying or suffering from is unresolved trauma?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think part of that is to just reflect on your upbringing, your childhood, your life experiences so far, and just be honest with yourself. And have you dealt with things so a good way to check is, when you think back on something, does fear wash over you? Does guilt wash over you? Do you avoid thinking of certain things that have happened in your life because it's too painful or it's too uncomfortable for you to even go there in your own mind? I feel like that would be a good indicator that you have some unprocessed things to deal with. But also a lot of these things, it's like once we get into it, we find that they're linked. But I would just say, if you struggle with any kind of anxious tendencies that are, I feel like anxiety has a bad rap, but anxiety is like normal emotion. But if you're
Mhm.
anxious all the time, or if you're depressed, or if you, um, you have your temper is blowing out of, if you have like,
Mhm.
if your emotions aren't like always coming back into balance and they're kind of just like raging out of control and like diving deep, then I would say like there's some unprocessed things to deal with there. I really feel like, even as I grow and learn more about myself, I'm realizing all these things that, even 5 years ago I didn't realize about myself, going, oh, I think there's a little more work to do in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I feel like it's kind of an ever evolving thing. We're never really done, I don't think. And I think it's, I like to think of healing as more of, instead of like a start and a finish, it's more like an ever evolving kind of spiral. Every time we go
Yeah.
around, we might be diving even back into the same things we've already quote unquote dealt with, but we're dealing with it now at a deeper level. We've healed to the point where we can now see it through new eyes, and we can kind of heal a deeper layer of that. And so I think that, if we're honest with ourselves, there's probably things that we know that we haven't dealt with, or we know that, maybe there's some unprocessed rage there, or anger, or maybe there's some resentment there, or things like that. And if you're really honest with yourself, I think we all kind of know what that is. But if you have a hard time with that, then I think seeking, the third party to help kind of dive into that a little bit more, for sure.
Mhm. And just something that emerged for me as you were talking about that is like so many women in this community are looking for meaning and purpose in their life, and I believe that these pain events or the things that have caused us trauma or pain are our soul's quest for meaning and purpose in this lifetime. And so
Yeah,
recognizing them as not some, I mean, I don't want to undermine, the pain and the trauma that has happened. And if you're ready to let go of it and to process it properly so that your body doesn't hold on to it any longer, this is a great vehicle to start doing that and looking at it as a way to finding just that purpose and meaning in your life, rather
definitely.
than, oh my God, another thing that's wrong with me, I have to fix this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I 100% agree with you. And I really do think that's the reason that we're here. I think that's, I really believe that we all come here for a purpose. And, your purpose isn't necessarily your job or your family that anything like that. I think our purpose, our soul's purpose, is to grow and evolve. And I think
Mm-hmm.
how do you grow and evolve? You are put through experiences that are going to challenge you in certain ways. And that challenge may be in forgiveness. It might be in, patience. It might be in, overcoming really heavy things like sadness, or, I think that every soul's journey is a little bit different. And I can certainly say from my experience, something that I always saw as like, this punishment, this unfair, unjust thing that happened to me, that I was just supposed to like carry with me for the rest of my life. It actually was kind of like a turning point for me when I actually started to become really honest with myself and start to heal that. I mean, that's what's led me to sitting here right now. That's what's led me to this
Mm-hmm.
work. And so I feel like it can be like, not that it's going to change your whole life. I think it will actually change your whole life when you start to heal those things. But I feel like maybe that's why we're here, is to go through
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of challenges. And for sure, some challenges are definitely heavier than others, and they seem very unfair and unjust. But I feel like what is the bigger the challenge, the more growth that can occur afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, it already happened. So you have the choice to
Exactly.
continue to sit in that, or to do something that will help you process it in a meaningful way, or in a helpful way, I should say. It might not
Yeah.
even be about meaning so much as helpfulness. So um, going back to the second question, then, can you share some insights from your experience and research, perhaps, on how healing unresolved trauma directly impacts chronic pain and symptoms?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason that I'm so passionate about this mind body connection is because I've actually seen it with my clients, and it's absolutely incredible to witness. So a couple of years ago, I actually had a client with fibromyalgia. And this is something I talk about in the book too, because it was honestly just one of those most profound moments that I feel like I will never forget. She had fibromyalgia. She was diagnosed several years before and basically struggled with pain every single day, as you do with fibromyalgia. She had everything from muscle pain, nerve pain, skin pain, like migraines, all the things, everything you could think of. She was struggling with that every single day. And in the last several years, she hadn't had a day without pain. It was always there. And so she was very open and willing to do the work and to see, what is the emotional connection? Why is my body why is my body afraid? Like, what is it afraid of? Basically, when we're feeling pain, pain is a danger signal. And when our body feels afraid all the time, when it's in that hypervigilant state, when it's in that fight or flight, that stress response, it's basically afraid of everything. I like to think of it like when we watch a scary movie and, after the movie's over and you're like, I know that was just a movie. And then you're kind of like scared, if something, your cat might jump down and you might jump, you're like you're very jumpy, and it's because you're on edge and you're afraid. And so it's basically what our body is doing. Our body is afraid and it's very on edge. And so every little sensation in the body, basically what happens when we have sensations in the body, and these can be sensations that we aren't even consciously aware of, they're just so minute, is we have these receptors all over our body, and those receptors pick up, they monitor sensations. And so, for example, if I was to stub my toe, then the receptors in my toe would immediately send a signal up to my brain. And before I even feel pain, they would send a signal up to my brain, and my brain would decide, okay, so we have a sensation in the toe. Is that sensation safe or dangerous? And my brain would decide that definitely is dangerous because I just stubbed my toe, so I would feel pain. And so when those little receptors in our body are picking up sensations, they're basically bringing that information up to our brain, and our brain is deciding, is that sensation safe or dangerous? And that's why probably everybody listening right now, and even you and I probably aren't aware of the feeling of your socks on your feet or the feeling of your clothes resting on your shoulders, because our brain has already decided that those sensations are safe and we don't need to worry about them. Right. And that's what happens with most of the sensations in our body. But when our body is in that fight or flight state, like we talked about at the very beginning, from past trauma or unresolved emotion, things like that, our body's already hypervigilant. And so every little sensation it could feel is a threat. And so if it feels like it's dangerous, it's going to give you pain to make sure that you deal with that. And so basically with my client with fibromyalgia, she was getting, all these sensations happening all over her body, and her brain was deciding that these sensations are dangerous. And so she was feeling pain all the time. And this is a lot of my chronic pain clients is, the back pain or neck pain or joint pain or shoulder pain or, stomach pain or all these things. And it's just their body is hypervigilant. It doesn't feel safe. And so in our sessions, we started to uncover the emotional connection. And the most incredible part about this work is that I don't sit here, claiming to know the answer at all. I simply guide my clients into their own mind, into a deeper state where they have access to these answers. And so, sometimes it's really clear and it's not, I won't say easy, but it's really clear and kind of makes a lot of sense. And other times it's a bit of like a mystery and we have to kind of dig a little deeper. And so on the second session, my client started to understand where this fear was coming from. And she was so I kind of guided her to follow that a little bit deeper. And we were taken back to an early memory, a childhood memory where she was really afraid. And we resolved that fear. And the next day she messaged me and said, I don't have pain today. And I was like, what? And she messaged me every day for, I think, like the first 4 or 5 days and said, I still don't have pain. I still don't have pain. So I worked with her in 2021. So it's been 2.5 years since we worked together, and she is still pain-free. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, like I said, so I'm not diagnosing or doing any of that kind of stuff, but my client doesn't have pain, and it's been 2.5 years. We resolved that stored fear, and her body finally decided that it's actually safe. And so she hasn't felt, and we also did another session on the migraines because the migraines continued after the pain stopped. So we did another session on the migraines. We followed that back to another young childhood trauma, again, not like life-changing, not, all the big T trauma that we think of, but just a little T trauma, resolved that. And then she hasn't had suffered with migraines at all since then either. So it can be that I mean, that was like such an insane case where it was just like, boom, everything was gone. And it was like
Yeah.
such an incredible moment. But that's the link between chronic pain, chronic disease, and our emotions. It's so intertwined. If our body doesn't feel safe, then it's going to let us know by being in pain, because that's the only way. I mean, sensations is the only way our body can communicate with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard something else in there, and that is the will. You said she was willing and open to
Yeah.
resolving this, and I think that is a big piece of it. Is when we've lived with something for as long as we might have, and to what you said earlier, some people live with this for all throughout their adulthood. Then there is an attachment to that. It's silly to say that I'm attached to the pain, the back pain or the migraines or the neck pain or the muscle tension and in my line of work anyways, it's surprising sometimes how much the subconscious wants to hold on to it, because as painful as it may be, it is the safety of knowing that's what, so I love, and maybe we can dive a little bit into that before we close out. I love the idea of hypnotherapy for this. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what hypnotherapy is and what a typical session with you would look like, so that we can maybe bring some safety into this space for people who might want to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I always say hypnotherapy and meditation are like sisters. They're not exactly the same, but they are very, very similar. And what I think is kind of hysterical is that if I said, "Hey, Yvonne, you want to go meditate with me?" You'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure, let's do it." And if I said, "Hey, should we do a hypnotherapy session?" Oh, people want to think about it. They're not really sure. It sounds kind of weird, and yet it's almost exactly the same thing. So when we go into meditation, we're going into that meditative state, which is the theta brainwave. So basically our brainwaves are slowing down from the alpha beta, slowing down into theta, where there's just a little bit less brain activity happening. And, our body feels a little bit more relaxed, and we're in that deep meditative state where we have more access, but easier access to our past memories, to our emotions. Sometimes our emotions are just really easy to access, or they just feel even bigger sometimes. Our imagination is really active in that state. So that's what happens when we go into meditation. And we do the exact same thing when we go into hypnosis. Hypnosis and meditation, we're going to the same place. We're slowing down the brain waves. We're going into that theta brainwave, and we have access to early memories. We have access to our imagination, and emotions can seem a little bit bigger. And what we're doing, the only difference really between hypnosis and meditation is what are you doing when you're in that state. And so with meditation, often you're doing it alone. You're there to clear your mind. You're there to, do whatever. With hypnosis, obviously we're going in with a specific goal in mind, but we're really just going to the exact same place. So if you're not afraid of meditation, there's really nothing to fear with hypnosis, because we're just going into the same place, and we're just accessing your own mind. And I also can say too, from personal experience, that some of the things that I've had to work through in my own mind have been some of the scariest things. The traumas that we go through, or the experiences we go through, we don't want to go through that again. We don't want to think about it. And that can be the scariest part for sure. But know that when you're in a hypnotherapy session, obviously you're not actually in the trauma. You're in a safe place. And I always tell my clients at the beginning of our first session, this is not mind control. I am not going to go in and fix your problems for you. It requires your full participation, but also know we're a team. So if you get uncomfortable, or if this feels like too much for you, you just let me know. And there's a lot I can do on my end to make it more comfortable for you, or we can also end the session at any time. And I've never had someone choose to end the session, but there are big feelings that come up sometimes. And that's what we're there to do. But having my clients know that, like, this is not like buckle up and you can't get out until the ride's over. It's like you're driving. So you let me know what you want to do. And if this feels like too much, then we can turn the car around, So I feel like that's a big thing too. And also, most of the time when my clients experience their first hypnotherapy session, all of the fears that they used to have kind of like are gone, because they're like, oh, okay, that's not what I expected. That's way easier and better. And kind of everything is okay after that. But it really does, going back to your point from earlier, it absolutely requires an open mind and a willingness. The only time I've really struggled with working with people is when they're really not willing to do the work. And it's like, I'm not your healer. I'm not here to do the work for you. And even if I wanted to, and even if I wanted to, I couldn't, because hypnotherapy, and I believe all healing is just self-healing. And so if you're ready to be your own healer, sign up for a session and let's do this. I'm just guiding you into the place where it's possible for you to make changes really quickly, but you're doing the healing. So when you're ready to heal yourself, that's when, the healing can actually happen.
Are they best done in person, or can they be done like on Zoom or virtually as well?
Yeah, so I actually see all my clients virtually. But
Oh,
before the pandemic happened, I was in a space where I had access to people could come to my home and do sessions. I've since moved, so it's not possible anymore. But so I had actually before the pandemic, I was having some clients in person and some clients virtually. And then when the pandemic hit, we all had to social distance, and so my in-person clients had to move to virtual. And what I
mhm.
actually found, which is very interesting, because I like doing things in person as well. So I feel like there's just like something about being in person. But what I noticed for hypnotherapy was that the clients that I was seeing in person, when they were in their own home, in their own space, lying on their own couch with their own blanket and cozy in their own environment, they actually went deeper and easier into hypnosis than they did on my couch. And I think it's just when you're going into hypnosis, just like if you're meditating, it's hard to
Mhm.
meditate if you're like, in an unfamiliar place, or if you're uncomfortable, if you had any reservations about it, then it's going to be harder to go into that state and really let yourself go deep, just like hypnosis. So if you're in your own home, lying on your own couch with your own stuff and your own smells, and if you're in your own space, there's a level of comfort there that I feel like just allows you to kind of sink down into the experience a little bit easier. And so that's what I found. And so since the pandemic, we actually moved in 2020, and I no longer have a space at my home. We live out of town too now. So I do everything virtually. And I mean, as long as you have a strong Wi-Fi connection, it's possible from it. I have clients from all over the world, so it's pretty incredible.
That is incredible. Well, thank you. So I will put your contact information in the show notes, both on the Freedom Seeker Show, but also here in this community. And I just quickly to wrap up, I would love for you to just share a couple of comments around the Uncaged Mind. This is Katie's book. She just published it this spring. It came out this spring, and it is a beautiful read. I'm halfway through. Can strongly recommend it. It is her personal journey and story, and laced with quite a few insights into hypnotherapy and the work that we've talked about here today. So can you share with us a couple of key concepts in, say, like 2 minutes?
Yes, absolutely. So the main concept of the book is that basically we're living in an illusion. We're living in an illusion created by our own beliefs. And so whatever you believe is your truth and your reality. And one of the biggest things I wanted to drive home in this book is we take information that is neutral, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. We take in neutral information and we make it mean something about us. And so, for example, your mom's upset, you're a child, your mom's upset, and she's yelling at you because your room's a mess, or you're being too loud, or yada yada. And instead of that being a her thing and neutral to you and completely, unaffecting you, we take it in and we make it mean something about us. We make it mean that I'm not loved, or I'm too much, or I'm too loud, or I'm too this, or I'm too that. And then we take that on and we create a belief around that. And then that's
Mhm.
part of our reality. And then we go through life and we go, oh, I'm too much for these people, or I don't want to be too much. So I'm gonna, dim myself down. And we create this whole story about it. But that's really just an illusion, because it never really was about you being too much in the first place. It was a her thing. And it doesn't actually affect you in any sort of way at all anyways. And so basically one of the really key things I wanted to drive home in this book is that in so many ways we take in this neutral information and we make it mean something about us when it actually doesn't mean anything about us, and we get to choose. And so we get to choose to go, you know what, that isn't mine, and I can decide who I'm going to be. I'm going to decide how bright I want to shine. And in so many ways we can do that. And I talk about even the connection between the mind and body, and how, not that the pain is an illusion, but it's just that the illusion of the separation between the mind and body, how that keeps us in pain, because we're going, the problem must be in the body. Well, and my doctor doesn't know the answer to that. It's incurable, or it's whatever. So then I'm just destined to be in pain the rest of my life. But we're missing this key component, and they go together. And so, I really just want to emphasize that, we can't go back and change the past, but we can change what it means to us, and that changes everything.
Mhm.
And so I do share a bit about my story, and how, all of these things that I've learned since working with people, I've come to these realizations about my own life, and kind of going back and also talking a lot about client experiences and how it kind of relates to, this work that I do with hypnotherapy. But really, I it's just that we're living in a self-made illusion, and we can change that at any time.
Oh, so good. So good. I would love to have you back on the Freedom Seeker Show and talk a little bit more about that if you're open to it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
where can people best reach you? On Instagram or LinkedIn, or where do you live?
Yes, I am on Instagram the most, and also you can visit my website, just katiePotratz.com.
Right on. And your Instagram is?
Oh, sorry, just at Katie Potratz.
Oh, so easy. I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for sharing your wonderful insights and wisdom with us here today. And just for those of you in the group here, Katie is in Canada.
I am.
I was talking with her about this in the green room, because I get so excited when we get to meet authors, local authors, or Canadian authors, and wisdom keepers and healers. You might not like to be referred to as a healer, but I love that you're here. And so the fact that you do virtual sessions, I will most certainly take you up on this. This is so
Amazing.
And I will put all of your information below. And if
Thank
you
you.
have any questions for Katie, please put them in the comments below, or send me an email, and I will make sure I will get Katie back onto the show and we'll answer some of those questions for you. All right.
Sounds good.
Until next time, have a wonderful day.